Alright, Admiral, it's time for your performance review. My performance review? But I'm in charge here. No, I don't mean about your job. I'm judging your outpost. This seems incredibly uncalled for. No, I judge every place that I live. Well, if you say so. You've done well. That is all. Well, I think I've done incredibly. You've done well. You are quite irritating sometimes. Ladies, gentlemen, and masters of all ages, this series is incredible. It is the lifeblood of us hunters. Once you become attached to Monster Hunter, you are in it for the long haul. No matter what your favorite Monster Hunter game is, chances are you've played any of the games that you can get your hands on. It is addictive, and rightfully so, as every game is a masterclass of design, and there's just nothing else quite like it out there on the market. It is essentially a genre in and of itself. As such, today I've come here to rate each game against each other in tier list fashion. For the most part, I'll be doing finished games, ones that include their expansion, but I'll separate a couple of the more recent titles from their expansion, as well as any that have particularly massive differences between them worth noting and talking about. And I'll also be including any of the major spin-off games that I have personally played myself and have opinions about. So with that said, let's dive right in release order with Monster Hunter, the first Monster Hunter, which I've put on the B tier. There are a couple of reasons for this. Yes, it is the first game, and the rest of the series would not exist without it. It is a feat of its own that stands quite tall for creating the basis that every other game in the series follows. However, when comparing it to every game that came afterwards, it does tend to land a little bit shallow. More than anything, it's the controls itself that I'm talking about. The game is a bit of a struggle to put your hands on, even if the world, the monsters, and the weapons are all incredible, and that's the reason that the series had to continue no matter what. Don't get me wrong, the B tier is there for a reason. It says that I respect the hell out of this game, but it definitely did have a lot of rough edges on it. Second then, we have Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. The end of the second generation of Monster Hunter, this one is placed firmly in the A tier. I've played this one and I loved it. It is one of the hardest Monster Hunter games that I've ever played, and unlike Monster Hunter 1, it is less because of the controls themselves. The monster list itself became far more varied in this generation. We got things like crabs, which are incredible, and we got a number of new weapons introduced as well, including the addition of longsword, hunting horn, gun lance, and bow, as well as the separation of the bow guns into light and heavy class to further differentiate their capabilities. This game was just solid all around and an absolutely excellent way to expand upon the fundamentals of Monster Hunter 1.
It made everything feel better.
Then we come to Monster Hunter Frontier in the A tier as well. This one is a bit hard to place in the order of this list at least, as yes, it did originally release in 2007, but it was updated and expanded upon many times for over a decade, and as such, this game somehow simultaneously both feels like a second generation game and a fourth generation game or onwards. It evolved constantly. This game is responsible for over 100 unique large monsters that are not in the main series. Some of the greatest challenges in all of Monster Hunter are found in this game. There are 2 weapons in the game that never made it to the main series in Magnet Spike and Tonfa, and multiple expanded playstyles for all the original weapons too. There was a ton going on, and having now actually played it, I love this game. Don't get me wrong, it had its flaws, quite a few of them honestly. It was grindy as hell, the pace gets really weird at points, and some monsters just feel like you're fighting one of those machines at the batting cages where it just spits out baseballs at 100 miles an hour and you either hit it or get smacked in the face. But on the whole, balancing the good and the bad, Frontier was a massive success and an extremely enjoyable game in my opinion. After that, we have Monster Hunter Tri in the C tier, which is pretty much the only earlier game that I've separated from its expansion, and that is for a couple of big reasons. First, the medium bowgun as a concept. This game removed the idea of light and heavy bowgun and instead let you customize your gun completely, and your customizations decided whether it was light, medium, or heavy based on the weight of the parts you used, which is a really cool concept in my opinion that I like much more than the current concept of the gun or weapons. However, while it did add underwater combat, which is a great change for the series, it was really cool, it also removed some of the weapons, weirdly. Tri itself only had great sword, sword and shield, hammer, lance, longsword, the customizable bowgun class, and then the new weapon, which was switch axe. It removed dual blades, hunting horn, gun lance, and bow, which were in the series in the game before. This is the reason that I put it where it is. The underwater combat concept was really awesome, but it was executed in a bit of a rough way, making it hard to grasp the controls of it. But the missing weapons is what truly hurt hurt this game for me quite a bit. Then we have Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate in the A tier. This game re-added the missing weapons from Tri, expanded on the underwater combat with even more monsters added in, and just in general, this game has one of the strongest monster rosters in any Monster Hunter game in my opinion. It did really well. The movement underwater was still a struggle for sure to actually control, and that is the thing that keeps it just slightly out of the S tier for me, as this one is really close. I think this one was a big step in the series though, and an absolutely lovely experience to play at that. Next up is Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, the first S-tier game. This is the only game on this list that I've not played myself personally, so I'm going heavily just based on my knowledge of it from afar, as well as community opinions that I've heard, and those opinions are always extremely high. This is many people's favorite Monster Hunter game that they've ever played. They say it has the best story of any of them, even to this day. This game also added both Charge Blade and Insect Glaive, which are relatively complex but fan-favorite weapons too. The monsters added in this game were interesting and cool, and of course the endgame was a mix of Apex monsters based on the Frenzy Virus, which was an unheard of concept in the series up to this point, and the Everwood, which was a map featuring multiple different biomes all attached to each other and living in harmony. This game was a shining example of Monster Hunter's potential, and I can't wait to play it one day myself.
Sooner rather than later, I hope.
After that comes Monster Hunter Stories, which I've put on the B tier. This was a really cool exploration into another gaming genre while still firmly in the Monster Hunter universe. The idea of taking an almost Pokemon-like approach, befriending monsters and fighting alongside them to take down other monsters, bigger monsters. This game was quite an interesting departure. I enjoyed it, but it was definitely quite shallow mechanically and was heavily held up by just how novel the whole thing was conceptually. Then we have Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on the A tier. This game had the most expansive monster roster of any Monster Hunter game, letting you hunt nearly 100 large monsters on various maps brought back from older games, and it totally changed up the combat system by adding in both hunting styles and hunter arts. I think the monster roster is understandably the big shining star of this game, and the combat was interesting too. It definitely felt different from standard Monster Hunter, and following up For You just before it was quite a difficult task, but the handful of unique new monsters that came from this game were pretty awesome creatures, and while the hunting styles were a bit hit and miss from weapon to weapon, they did create some very unique and fun ways of playing the weapons that we already knew and loved. Next up then is Monster Hunter World, which I put in the S tier. This is the game that totally revamped the way that the combat of the series felt on a base level. It added moves to most if not all weapons. It changed the way that maps work to make them feel properly open world. They added proper endemic life systems and just made everything feel like a living, breathing ecosystem. No game, in my opinion, feels better to just walk around in the Monster Hunter series than Monster Hunter World, and this is an incredible feat. The only real thing that let this game down at all was the endgame of it, as it wasn't particularly expansive, but given it was a base game rather than an expansion, it changes as much as this did fundamentally in the original just implementation of the game. I am more than happy to give it S tier regardless of that. After that is Iceborne, the expansion to World, which again I will be putting in the S tier. As far as I'm concerned, aside from literally one thing, this game was just World, but way better. The new monsters were all incredible, the new map was great, a bunch of weapons got new moves that were fun to use, some of them incorporating base mechanics from World to make them more involved in your actual hunting actions like slinger ammo, and I thought that was just really cool. The one thing I think this game had that it would be maybe better off without is the Clutch Claw. It was a cool concept, and on some weapons it was even actually fun, augmenting your moveset, but on the whole it added this weird janky moment every few minutes of every hunt where you felt absolutely required to use the Clutch Claw regardless of what weapon you were wielding. That said, this game also had a much more expansive endgame than base Monster Hunter World, and with the addition of the Guiding Lands, which was a fantastic concept that kept being changed and fixed over time, and as it currently stands, I consider this game a masterpiece among video games just as a whole.
It was nearly perfect.
Moving into the final stretch then, and quite recent games at that, we have Monster Hunter Rise, which I've added to the A tier. Rise was an incredibly interesting change to the system that had begun in World, not really a step backwards at all so much as a step sort of sideways, keeping a lot of the basic design ideas but repurposing endemic life to be used more like tools than just creatures in the wild, bringing in switch skills and silkbinds, almost like an updated version of the hunting system from Generations Ultimate, and it created a relatively customizable and personal version of hunting for every person that I really appreciate conceptually. The new monsters were definitely incredible the whole way through, some of them being in my all-time favorite monsters, but all of them being based off of yokai did make a couple of them feel a little bit less natural, less like the classic design of Monster Hunter monsters, and more like actual demons in monster form. The endgame is extremely divisive in the community as well, and depending on your point of view, you can either call it extremely open, letting you hunt whatever you want and still be rewarded, or simply aimless, not giving you a proper objective and removing the incentive to hunt specific targets. Then with a slight break before the finale, we have Monster Hunter Stories 2: Wings of Ruin, which again is in the A tier for me. This game was a notable step up from the first Stories game. The combat got way more complex in great ways, the monster roster grew significantly, the story was far better in my opinion. I just think it was all around a much better experience and a wonderful one as a whole to play. Being able to do a fair bit of multiplayer PvE in it was really fun as well. I think it was a prime example of what a Monster Hunter spin-off game can achieve, an entry into another genre that is quite complex but still has the guts of Monster Hunter within it, and I can't wait to see this style improve even further with what will almost definitely be Stories 3 in the future. And then finally on today's list we have the Sunbreak expansion to Monster Hunter Rise in the S tier for me. The new monsters added in this were all incredible in my opinion. The way that they expanded on the switch kill system was really cool, changing up some weapons even more, adding extra playstyles depending on what you choose, and then the new map and changes to endemic life were all extreme positives in my opinion too. The story is great, the follower system was fun while it lasted, and there were a lot of changes to that original endgame from base Rise 2, mostly added in the first title update with the anomaly investigations, but these creatures are a much more interesting endgame than base Rise had. It gives you proper goals, it gives you a separate ranking up system, and it gives you clear-cut rewards for taking part in this system, while also rewarding you for hunting lower tier monsters boosted up to higher levels by the system itself. Of course, this expansion isn't quite finished yet, so part of this ranking is involving my expectations for the next couple of title updates, but so far, this is simply one of my favorite Monster Hunter experiences that I've had to date, and so there is no other place I'd feel comfortable putting it on this tier list. And that just about does it, everyone. My full tier list of the Monster Hunter games themselves over the last 18 years. Isn't it incredible how far the series has come over this time? Of course, feel free to tell me your thoughts on my rankings, which of the games that you would swap around, and why. But remember, a fair bit of this is just my personal opinions on everything. I think every game in the series is incredible in its own right. This is just how I would compare them with each other. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.